All right, let's go ahead and get started. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll begin by talking about the importance of establishing some goals or targets for your job search so that you can search with intention and focus in the new year. Then we'll discuss the importance of creating an action plan that can help guide and direct your job search efforts and what to include in that plan. We'll also look at some potential alternative methods that you can use to improve your marketability as a viable candidate. Next, we'll go over some important strategies to employ when searching and applying for jobs to maximize your chances of landing an interview. And then we'll finish the main portion of our presentation by discussing some effective interview preparation strategies before we close out our webinar with our live audience Q&A so that you have a chance to ask your questions directly with one of our career experts. So let's begin by discussing the importance of determining your job search goals or target roles, which is what I mean by your what's next, as well as some strategies that you can use to help you identify those goals or target roles. So, the first step, ideally, when launching your job search is to figure out what you're looking for, what type of role you're targeting, because that is going to influence a lot of the other steps that you take during your job search. Without having this type of clarity at the start of your search, it's really easy to waste a lot of time, scrolling through pages and pages of job postings, kind of feeling like nothing is a good fit for you. So, when you're trying to determine your what's next, it's important to consider if you want a new job, a new company, or an entirely new career. In terms of a new job, maybe you really like the field that you're in, but you want to try something a little different. You could look for roles that are sort of adjacent to your current role, but perhaps with a different focus. Or you can maybe look for roles that are at a higher level than your current role, but still doing similar work. And this could be at either your current company or at similar organizations. In terms of a new company, maybe you really like what you do and you want to keep doing it, but you perhaps experienced a layoff or you no longer want to work for your current employer for whatever reason. That's when you would aim to make more of a lateral move to a new company or organization. And in terms of entirely new career, maybe you're burned out and you no longer enjoy the type of work that you've been doing and you want to kind of completely overhaul your career. That's when you need to really closely examine things like your interests and your values, as well as what type of, transferable skills that you possess, and then try to identify other types of careers that you could pivot into. Now, it's not always easy to figure out, what you want or to even know what the possibilities available to you are. So I have listed some methods that we encourage people to try to help determine what they want. And the first one is self-reflection. Self-reflection essentially involves asking yourself questions like, what do I enjoy doing? What am I trying to avoid? What makes me feel my best? What makes me not want to go to work in the morning? These types of questions can help you narrow the focus of your job search down. And I also do want to mention here that if you're considering a career change or are maybe unsure about what type of role you want to target, I have included a free resource in the handout section titled How to Choose a New Career, the 4-Step System, which does include some of these types of questions for self-reflection. So highly encourage you to check that out if you are struggling to determine your what's next. And another way that you can, potentially determine your target role or your what's next is by taking different assessments. They can help you uncover things like, what you're skilled at or what you're interested in that maybe you didn't realize yourself. And many of these assessments also then present you with some career options that could align with your results so that you can then, research them further on your own. And I will also say that our 4-step system does include links to a few free assessments that could be valuable for you in case you're interested in giving assessments a try. Another way to identify and learn more about your potential options or target roles is to leverage different AI tools like ChatGPT or Google Gemini. For example, you could go to ChatGPT and say, I've been a teacher for 10 plus years, but I'm looking to make a change. What are some career options outside of education that could be a good fit for me? Or maybe you could say something like, I've worked in sales in the tech industry for the last 5 years, but I'm looking to now grow my career. What options should I consider? And when you use AI tools like this, you can provide whatever details about yourself that you think are relevant. Things like, things that you're trying to avoid or things that really interest you. And then you'll receive results that are tailored to your specific needs and preferences. And then you can use the results that the AI tool presents you as a jumping off point to do more research. And you can even ask the AI tool for more details about any of those options that seem like they could be interesting to you. And then as you start to narrow down the path that you think is right for you, it's also incredibly helpful to start trying to conduct informational interviews. Essentially, informational interviews is when you aim to find people who are doing the type of work that you want to do and working for the type of companies that you would want to work for, and then see if they would be open to answering some questions about, their career path or, suggestions that they might have for you if you pursue that type of role, or mistakes to avoid, or really any other helpful information. That type of information, kind of straight from the source, can be extremely valuable. But you do also want to make sure that you're not just kind of spamming strangers with requests to interview them. You need to exercise effective networking strategies in order to obtain or land informational interviews. And effective networking strategies is something that we'll talk about on a few of our later slides. And then another strategy to help you decide, your target roles that isn't listed on this slide is to simply read job descriptions for different types of roles. You don't have to search on job boards by job title only. So for instance, you could search by using different skills that you possess and then see what options pop up and read those job descriptions to see if any particular types of roles or job titles stand out to you. But either way, it's important to understand your what's next before really diving into your job search so that you can search with focus and intention and avoid wasting your valuable time. Once you have determined your what's next, it's then incredibly helpful to develop an action plan to kind of further guide you through your job search. And a great place to start when you're developing your action plan is doing some more in-depth research. Research is going to improve your understanding of what your target audience, meaning potential employers in your field of interest, are going to find attractive. You want to understand the nuances of your field of choice so that you can better understand how to market yourself effectively to your target audience. So research is always a good place to begin when you're putting your plan into action. It's also important as you start to launch your job search that you make plans to tap into your network. Talk to people that you already know and tell them about how you're job searching and what you're searching for to see if they have any advice or ideas for you. You can also look for new potential connections by searching for people who are doing the type of work you want to be doing at the companies you want to work at, like we mentioned before, to try to establish relationships with them and potentially get some inside information, or maybe even obtain a referral for an open role. Tapping into your network can lead to a lot of support and advice that you might not have gotten otherwise. So it's definitely worth including in your action plan. And then also make sure that you are updating your job search assets, meaning things like your resume, cover letter, online profiles, and any other potential, materials like perhaps a blog or a portfolio. You want to make sure that you are presenting your skills, experience, and value to your audience in a way that is going to be relevant to them so that you can catch their attention and spark their interest in you. Your past audience isn't necessarily the same as your current audience, so you need to make sure that you are calibrating accordingly. And we'll talk in more detail later about tailoring your application materials to each individual job, but remember to keep your target roles in mind as you start updating your materials so you can ensure that they're going to be relevant to your audience. And another consideration for your action plan should be thinking about ways to increase your visibility, which is where, your online profiles, especially your LinkedIn profile, can really come in handy. And what I mean by increasing your visibility is doing things that will attract positive attention from others in your industry or field. Things like following relevant professionals or thought leaders and companies in your field, actively commenting on posts about your your area of expertise, sharing insightful industry articles, or even creating your own organic posts about topics that are related to your role or your field. This type of activity can not only help you build, valuable connections that could lead to interesting opportunities, but it will also help spark the interest of recruiters and hiring managers that are searching for potential candidates using online tools like LinkedIn. And also keep in mind that you can continue doing all of these things as you progress through your job search, because there are always improvements and modifications that you can be making to increase your competitiveness as you go along. Okay, so let's now talk about some alternative strategies that you can use to increase your job search, or excuse me, your job prospects, and improve your marketability. Chances are good that many of you are already using some of these strategies, but if you feel like you're hitting a roadblock or you're simply looking for ways to kind of increase your chances of success, these could be some good strategies to consider. And first, we have upskilling and reskilling. Through a little research and some deeper consideration of your desired career path, chances are pretty good that you could identify, some skills or maybe some industry specific tools that you could learn or hone that would make you more marketable in your field. From there, you can look at options to acquire those skills, like through online courses or different training programs. Some training programs or courses can be costly, but there are tons of options out there to consider, including ones that are more affordable and budget friendly. Another way to improve your marketability is to find volunteer opportunities. Volunteering in roles that allow you to apply your skills in a professional setting or learn new skills that could be valuable in your field is a great way to gain marketable experience. And volunteer work can absolutely be included on your resume. And volunteering is an especially helpful approach if you're attempting to make a career change, because you then are able to gain experience doing the type of responsibilities and tasks that you are hoping to do in your future career. Plus, you might end up with some new networking connections, or if you work closely with members of the organization over a long enough time, they might be willing to serve as a reference for you. So a lot of potential benefits there to volunteering. It's also smart to consider freelancing and gig work. Freelancing and gig work is similar to volunteering in that it can help you build experience. And freelancing and gig work, essentially means working on, or working in temporary roles to complete like a specific project. But it can help you, fill employment gaps. It can demonstrate your resourcefulness and show your adaptability, all while helping you remain financially stable while job searching, which is something that, volunteering obviously cannot do. Job shadowing and informational interviewing are other good strategies to consider. We've touched on this a bit already, so I won't go into extensive detail, but job shadowing and informational interviewing is a great way to kind of learn helpful information and make strong connections in your field of choice, which can increase your visibility and potentially lead to new opportunities down the road. You could also consider spending time working on personal projects, or passion work as it's sometimes called. Creating your own projects can help you showcase your relevant skills and give you an opportunity to add relevant hands-on work to your portfolio, your blog, your LinkedIn profile, or your resume. It can show your dedication to your field, and also give you something to discuss in interviews when you're asked about something you may not have had the chance to do yet in a professional capacity. And then lastly, you can consider joining professional associations or organizations. Joining and being active in professional organizations related to your field or industry can help you gain insider knowledge and gives you an opportunity to network with others. Many professional organizations do things like hold webinars, workshops, conferences, networking events where you can, learn about new trends and best practices and make the acquaintance of other professionals with similar professional interests. And it can look good on your resume, especially if you've worked to gain a leadership position within that organization. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is actually searching and applying for new jobs. And it might sound like a simple concept on the surface, but there are definitely some important best practices that you can and should be using in order to maximize your chances of success. So we'll start with some of the primary methods that people use to job search. And the primary one these days is using online job boards. When using online job boards, there are a few important things to keep in mind. It is smart to not limit yourself to one job board only because different employers post on different sites. So you could be missing out on opportunities if you solely rely on one single job board. Also, it's a good idea to look for niche job boards or job boards that specialize in a specific type of work or industry. For example, FlexJobs specializes in jobs that offer some type of remote, hybrid, or flexible working arrangement. So consider searching for niche job boards that align with your specific interests and preferences. And it is also a good idea when using job boards to leverage whatever type of advanced search features or filters they offer so that you can find roles that are closely aligned with your needs, interests, and preferences. The next method the next method is to use the reverse job search. Essentially, you research and identify companies that you would really like to work for whatever reason, and create a list of target employers. And then from there, you can aim to learn as much about those companies. You can follow them and engage with their company profiles on social media. You can bookmark their hiring page so you can regularly check if they are hiring for roles that would be a good fit for you. And you can work to connect with and build relationships with people that already work there, which brings us to our next method on this slide, which is networking. Networking, when done the right way, it does take time because you need to lay some groundwork. At its most basic level, networking is essentially building and maintaining relationships with other people. These can be people that you already know or have directly met through, your work or maybe an in-person event, or it can be others that you find through a social media platform like LinkedIn. When you're job searching, it's a good idea, like we've kind of touched on already, to let some trusted members of your existing network know about it. They might be able to give you some solid advice or, notify you of open roles that you might not have found otherwise. Maybe they could connect you with others who could help you or even give you a referral to an open job at their company. It's also a good idea to connect your networking efforts to those target companies or target roles that we've talked about, which is where LinkedIn can be a tremendous help because it gives you potential access to so many more people than you likely would ever meet in person. Using the search bar at the top of LinkedIn, you can pretty easily find people who are doing the type of work that you want to be doing. And then using a company's profile on LinkedIn, you can pretty easily find people who work for those organizations. From there, you can follow those people on LinkedIn. You can engage with their content, meaning that you like and comment on their posts in a supportive and appreciative way. And then eventually you could reach out to them with a connection request once you've kind of, established yourself in their world online. And you want to do this sort of slowly over time, trying to show your genuine interest in and appreciation for, what they share or the knowledge and experience they possess. That's how you start to build the relationship. And then after you've established a relationship and continue to nurture it through consistent engagement, you could then eventually make a small request of that person, like seeing if they would be willing to answer some questions about, their type of work or their company. And as you continue engaging with people in this way, you'll sort of naturally be able to begin sharing about your own goals and professional interests. And then, these people can potentially help you just like your existing network could by giving you advice, connecting you with others, mentioning job openings you might not have found yourself, or even giving you a referral to an open job at their company. But, like I said, networking takes time and the benefits aren't realized overnight, but it is definitely a strategy that you don't want to neglect. And if you continue maintaining your network over time, you'll be prepared for for future job searches as well, kind of giving yourself an added level of career security. And that is just sort of a basic strategy for networking that I just described there. Because it really is a topic that we could talk about for hours. But if you are interested in applying this strategy more effectively, make sure to check out some of the resources that I've included in the handout section. But on the topic of searching and applying for jobs, I do also want to take a moment to talk about job scams because they are an unfortunate but very real part of the job search process. The most important thing to know is that scammers, at the end of the day, they want your money, whether it is through direct payments or by obtaining sensitive information that will allow them to steal from you down the road, like by stealing your identity. You want to keep that end goal in mind because that will help you keep yourself safe. But on this slide are some prominent red flags to watch out for. So let's go over each one of these here briefly. The first one is too good to be true offers, which are really one of the oldest telltale warning signs of a job scam because it's the primary method that scammers use to lure in potential victims. Basically, if an offer sounds like it is too good to be true, it most likely is. Jobs that offer ridiculous amounts of money for very little effort or hours, they do not exist in the real world. But people have been falling for get-rich-quick schemes since job scams were first introduced, so scammers keep relying on that tactic. Next, make sure to watch out for any person or job posting telling you that you need to pay an application fee. Legitimate companies do not ask candidates to submit an application fee, so this should be a clear giveaway that you've encountered a scammer who is trying to solicit a direct payment from you. Then we have requests for sensitive information, particularly at the early stages of the application or interview process. Legitimate employers will need some details about you, but it is important to note when you might be asked for those details. Really, the only sensitive information that an employer might request from you in the initial application stages of the process would be things like, maybe your date of birth, the state or country in which you live, your education, or maybe your references. Anything like your social security number, your driver's license number, or any bank account information, that would come much later in the process, like when you are signing your contract because you've accepted the job offer, or sometime during the actual onboarding process. And when they request that information, they're going to collect it from you through a secure document signing software platform. So definitely make sure that you are keeping that in mind. And another similar warning sign is if the employer is asking you to use their private VPN to complete their application. Chances are good that what they are actually trying to do is gain access to your desktop so that they can steal sensitive information, including your passwords. So definitely watch out for VPN scams as well. You also want to watch out for unsolicited job offers. It's not unheard of for a recruiter to reach out to a candidate because, maybe you posted your resume on a job search board or they found you on LinkedIn, but they're going to contact you suggesting that you apply for a role that they are trying to fill. They're not going to contact you with an outright job offer. There should still be some type of formal application and interview process if that unsolicited contact is in fact legitimate. If they are simply reaching out, offering you a job that you never applied for without any type of formal process, it's a really good sign that you've encountered a scam. Another common warning sign is an overwhelming sense of urgency throughout the entire application and interview process. Scammers want you to ignore what your better senses are telling you, so they aim to distract you by rushing you through the process. If they can distract you with a sense of urgency, like by telling you you need to act fast before someone else gets offered the job, then you might ignore the fact that they're requesting sensitive information from you or asking you to pay some type of cost or fee. And then lastly, if you never have any type of face-to-face interaction with the employer, that should definitely raise your sense of caution. As I mentioned with unsolicited job offers, legitimate jobs have a formal interview process and they will not rely solely on text-based interviews. If you ever encounter an interview process that is entirely text-based, or maybe just one quick phone screen before you're offered the role without ever seeing the person face to face, including over video conferencing where they aren't turning on their camera, that should really raise your level of suspicion. Now, it is important to note that I did say legitimate jobs won't rely solely on text based interviews, because it is possible that a text based interview could be used as part of the initial screening process, like maybe instead of a phone interview. But again, there should be some type of face to face interaction, which could include video conferencing with cameras on later in the process, like during a second or third round interview. But like I said, scams are an unfortunate but very real part of the job search these days. So make sure that you are staying informed and doing your best to keep yourself safe. All right, so now let's talk about some important tips for when you actually start applying for roles. In today's competitive job market, a one size fits all resume and cover letter will no longer cut it. If you hope to stand out from the crowd, it is absolutely essential that you tailor your application materials for each job to which you are applying. This way, you are presenting your skills and experience and accomplishments in a way that is going to be impactful to recruiters and hiring managers, meaning that they are more likely to then invite you to interview for the position. And the first step in doing this effectively is to think about your audience and what will be relevant to them. To understand what will be relevant to your audience, you want to use the job description as your guide. I often compare the job description to your cheat sheet. The employer is literally giving you the answers to the test with that job description, and they want you to use it. So pay attention to the types of things that they are looking for in a potential candidate, and then try to show how you possess a background that is aligned with their needs and priorities. And with your resume, you want to go beyond just telling your reader, the responsibilities that you held or the skills that you possess. You want to try to show your positive impact and highlight the outcomes that you achieved while using your skills in a professional environment. You can think of it as taking a show, don't just tell approach. And a helpful tip to remember, considering that job descriptions can be confusing, is that you can use AI tools to help you in analyzing those job descriptions. You can just use a prompt like, based on the following job description, what are the top needs and priorities of the employer hiring for this role? And then paste in the job description and let the AI tool analyze and summarize the description for you. You still want to make sure to read and analyze the description yourself, but AI can help you make sure that you aren't missing anything important. And another strategy that you can use to make this tailoring of your materials easier and less time consuming is what I often refer to as the master resume strategy. Basically, what I do whenever I'm job searching is I'll think about, my target roles or target fields. Usually I have somewhere around 2 to 4 in mind during my job search. Then I create 2 to 4 master resumes with each one of those resumes specifically geared towards those different roles or fields that I'm targeting. I still have, all the same jobs listed on each resume, but the things that I describe for each role, including, the skills and accomplishments that I emphasize, and even the order of my bullet points, that's going to differ with each resume so that I'm highlighting the most relevant things for my different potential audiences. Then, when I find a job that I want to apply for, I pick the most relevant master resume to work from and I make a copy of that master resume. And then I will heavily tailor my professional summary section at the top of my resume to specifically align with that particular job description. I will also, double check my descriptions of past roles to see if there's anything that I need to maybe, emphasize better, or maybe see if I need to reorder my bullet points. But the bulk of my tailoring efforts are spent on my summary section, which saves me a lot of time and prevents me from having to write, a brand new resume for each and every application, while still allowing me to have a resume that is, effectively geared towards the priorities of my audience. So hopefully that tip can save you some time in tailoring your application materials in the future. Okay, so no job search webinar would be complete without some discussion about job interviews and some effective interview preparation strategies. So let's get into that now. The first thing you really want to do as you are preparing for an interview is to consider the process that you're going to be going through. So, first, think about which type of interview you are likely encountering. Is this a first round interview or a later round interview? First round interviews tend to be brief. They are often conducted over the phone or as a one-way interview, and they are primarily used to assess whether or not you meet the minimum requirements and are worth advancing through the process. So this means you should try to keep your responses, short or concise, and you want to fully understand the role and how your experience aligns with that role, so you can demonstrate your fit. And you also want to maybe try to show a little enthusiasm for the role and the company. Now, later round interviews, they tend to be much longer. They are typically conducted either in person or through a video conference, and are designed to assess your deeper qualifications, your cultural fit, and your ability to contribute meaningfully to the team. So in later rounds, it's smart to provide, actual stories from your past that will help showcase your fit, which we will talk about on the next slide. And in terms of, the type of interview, you also want to consider if it will be a more technical or performance-based interview where you perhaps need to, complete some type of task or assessment, versus a more behavioral or competency-based interview, which focuses more on questions related to, how you would behave in a given situation, or questions that assess your knowledge of the field. You also want to prepare yourself for different interview environments. With that previous bullet, I mentioned how there can be some differences in how interviews are conducted, like over the phone, a one-way interview, in person, or through a video conferencing platform. That's what I mean by interview environment. Each environment has its nuances, so be sure to consider and prepare for those nuances. For instance, with an in-person interview, you would want to map out your travel route that you would take to make sure that you're there on time. But for a video interview, you'd want to make sure to test your technology beforehand and make sure that you have a strong internet connection. So be mindful of different environments and make sure that you're preparing yourself accordingly. And regardless of what type of interview or what environment you're interviewing in, you want to make sure that you are showcasing your professionalism. Arriving to the interview or logging in, 5 to 10 minutes early, researching the company thoroughly, dressing in appropriate attire, exercising your manners and being polite, doing your best to communicate clearly, listening to your interviewer actively, balancing confidence with humility, and handling potential negative topics in a tactful manner are all important things to remember, and they all say a lot about your character. And the same goes for your post-interview etiquette. You'll always make sure that you send a thank you email within 24 hours. Make sure that you respond to their outreach promptly and courteously. And remember to maintain your professionalism regardless of the outcome. Once you've taken a bit of time to understand and consider the process that you're about to go through, you can then move on to some tangible, effective interview preparation steps, which is what we will talk about now. So, in terms of higher level preparation, here are some important things on this slide that you'll want to make sure to include in your preparation efforts when you have an interview scheduled. And the most important aspect of your preparation centers on making sure that you fully understand the role and how your skills and experience align. Remember to use that job description as a guide here. I personally like to print out the job description and go line by line, kind of jotting down notes in the margin about how I have done, those exact things that they have listed or very similar things. But also be prepared to talk about the things that you haven't done. Employers don't expect you to have 100% of what they're looking for, but if you get asked about something that you haven't done, you should be able to talk about something similar that you have done, or at least show that you've done your research and can explain what you would do in that situation. And along those same lines, you want to prepare examples and stories from your past that show how your skills and experience align with this position. As often as is applicable in an interview, you want to sort of back up or support your responses with actual examples that showcase your relevant qualities and your ability to make a positive impact. For example, if they ask you your greatest strength and you say problem solving, but just kind of leave it at that, that's not going to inspire a lot of confidence that you're actually a good problem solver. Instead, tell them a story about how you actually identified and went about solving a problem at work and what positive outcomes you achieved by solving that problem. Using the job description as your guide, you should hopefully be able to come up with, 5 to 10 solid stories from your previous experience that show why you would be a good fit for this particular role. It can also be really helpful to consider questions that you might be asked during an interview, not because you should, script out your responses, your exact responses, but because it can get your mind thinking in the right direction and make you feel more confident going into that interview. And also, you can try to think about some role and industry specific questions as well as, just common or general interview questions. And for role specific questions, I really like to use AI tools like, again, ChatGPT or Google's Gemini. You could just copy the job description, head over to your AI tool of choice, and say something along the lines of, based on the following job description, what are 20 questions that I might be asked during an interview for this position? Then, you can review some of the potential questions that it suggests to you that are more directly tied to that specific role. And again, you don't want to script and rehearse your responses because there is really no guarantee that you'll actually be asked any of those questions. But this strategy can help you plan out some talking points and prepare some solid stories, related to the topics that are most likely to come up. And then lastly, you want to prepare some questions to ask them because the majority of interviews end with, do you have any questions for us? You should avoid asking about things that you could have found out for yourself if you did some research, and questions about things like salary, benefits, time off, things like that, because those are going to be discussed when they actually give you an offer for the job. So aim to ask questions that show your commitment to performing well in the role, or questions about the company specifically that you couldn't have found through your research. For instance, I like to ask how success will be measured for the person in the role because I want to have a clear understanding of expectations. If company culture is important to you, as another example, you could ask them for examples of how they help employees maintain a healthy work-life balance, or maybe how they invest in their employees' professional development. But I always try to come prepared with 8 to 10 questions to ask because I know that some of my questions are likely going to be answered during the interview. And then I usually end up actually asking only 3 to 5 questions because I want to be respectful of their time. But preparing thoroughly for interviews is absolutely essential if you want to feel confident and perform well. So hopefully these tips will help you with your preparation efforts and maximize your chances of landing that role. All right, so before we move on to our Q&A portion of this webinar, let's go over some reminders and action steps that you can take going forward. The first is, take time to fully understand your what's next so that you can operate with clear goals, target roles, and companies in mind. Do your research so you can have a fully informed job search, which will allow you to be more focused during your search and avoid wasting your time. Think about ways to improve your marketability through things like upskilling, volunteering, or freelancing. Employ multiple best practices and job search strategies like using different job boards, conducting a reverse job search, and networking so you can maximize your chances of success. Always tailor your application materials to fit the position because it's important to think about your audience and leverage job descriptions to your advantage. And prepare thoroughly for interviews and always follow up so that you can present yourself as a strong fit for the job and leave them with a strong impression of you as a potential candidate. Okay, so as a reminder, a copy of the recording as well as the resources presented during the presentation will be emailed out within the next week. Do be sure to check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered there. For even more tips, tricks, and resources, I recommend going to the FlexJobs blog. You'll see the URL there on the screen. It includes a vast amount of free articles, resources, webinars, and videos for members and non-members alike. Now let's go ahead and open up to your questions. Please remember to type them in the Q&A area rather than the chat section, and feel free to give a thumbs up to anyone else's question you would also like to hear the answer to so that we know which questions are the most popular. All right, everyone, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar now. Before we dive into your questions, could someone just confirm for me in the chat section that you're able to hear me clearly? I'd just like to verify that before I begin potentially talking into a void. All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. So once again, my name is Keith Spencer, and I am one of our career experts here at FlexJobs, and I will be answering your questions for you today. So let's head over to that Q&A section, and I will start by answering the questions with the highest number of upvotes. So our first question here says, do you personally recommend any other online job boards which offer reputable protection against online scammers? I have found that LinkedIn has an overwhelming presence of bad actors. So I am sorry that you have, found that to be the case. That is unfortunate to hear. But one of the frustrating parts with a lot of these larger job boards is, they simply don't have the capacity to kind of rigorously screen job listings in the way that a niche job board like FlexJobs is able to. So, to my knowledge, FlexJobs is the only job board out there that I am aware of that rigorously screens all the job postings before they are actually listed on the site. I know some people, are resistant to paying for a subscription. I totally understand that. I'm glad that we offer a lot of free resources like these webinars, like our blog, to support job seekers regardless. But the reason that we are a subscription-based site is because we actually have a team of researchers that is going through and vetting and verifying the jobs that are listed on our site before they are listed on our site to make sure that they are going to be, free of scams and help protect job seekers. So my recommendation would be, if you aren't interested in a subscription, totally understand that. Still check out our blog there. The URL is on the screen, flexjobs.com/blog. And in the search bar on the blog, just type in the word scam. You're going to see we have tons of different articles and blog posts and stuff like that with way more in-depth information than I went into on that one slide in this presentation. So if you're not going to get a subscription and you are worried about avoiding scams, make sure that you are at least educating yourself on all of the potential scams out there, red flags and stuff like that, so you know what to look for. So hopefully that's helpful for you, and I am wishing you safe searching when using other job search boards. But thank you for asking that question, and let's go ahead and move on to our next one here. Okay, so this is a really good question. This person is asking, do you have any advice for making the most of AI tools for resume writing and applications without the AI overshadowing my own personability and unique voice? So yeah, you're highlighting one of the biggest problems of using AI tools to, write your documents for you. And I honestly don't suggest having AI tools just flat out write your documents for you. But I do think that AI tools can be really, really helpful in providing you, samples that are kind of tailored to your specific situation, depending on, what information you're providing the AI tool. So, if you, let's say you gave it, the body of your current resume, and you talked a bit more about, your best skills and proudest accomplishments, and gave it some insights into, your target roles, well, then the AI tool can probably revise your resume pretty solidly for, what you have, provided or requested of it. But then I would look at the, we'll call them samples that it provided you in terms of the bullet points it wrote and whatnot. And then I would put them into my own words. If you, maybe you're not like me, but if I recall back to when I was, in my early 20s, just getting out of college, writing my resume for the first time. I'm embarrassed to admit that was the first time I wrote my resume. I was way behind the crowd. That's kind of why I like doing career development stuff now, because I help people avoid my mistakes. But one of the first things I did, I was a school teacher at the time. I looked up on Google just sample teacher resumes, because one of the best ways to learn is by looking at examples and samples. So you can use the AI tool to provide you with some samples that, again, are kind of already tailored to your individual situation, but then just reword them and put them into your own sort of, tone of voice, or your unique voice, as you mentioned there. On the flip side, another way that you could do this is, let's say that you wrote your entire resume yourself, and then you maybe go line by line or section by section, and just ask the AI tool, can you please review the following resume bullet points for me, and see how it might reword things. And then you could just take a word here, or a sentence there, or a phrase there, and just kind of merge the two versions of them together. But I use AI tools for a lot of things, both in my personal and professional life. And I would say, if I'm having an AI tool help me write something, I probably end up with maybe only about, gosh, like 15, maybe 20% of what the final product is from the AI tool. Like the vast majority of it is still from me. It's probably even less than that, like maybe even 10%. So I use it to help me generate ideas, to get the wheels turning, to maybe, think of a good word here or there to use. But the vast majority of it, at the end of the day, is my own my own work that I'm producing there. So hopefully, I know I probably rambled a little bit there, but hopefully that makes sense to you, and is, a strategy that you can employ. Just consider it as giving you, really good samples to go with. It's always easier to do something when you're not starting from a blank slate, and AI tools can help you not have to start from that blank slate. So hopefully that's helpful. Really good question. I love talking about AI tools, so thank you for that. And let's go ahead and move on to our next question here. Okay, so this question, what is the best process to follow with a job search when you have been laid off and need to find another job relatively quickly? So I would, I'll start by just emphasizing, the things that were mentioned in this presentation. Those are some of the best ways to maximize your chances of a successful job search. Leveraging your network, tapping into AI tools, finding ways to make yourself more marketable, tailoring your documents and your job search assets to your audience. All of those things can increase your chances of success and shorten the length of your job search. Now, that being said, the job search can still be lengthy. So if you are in a situation where, maybe bills are due, or rent or mortgage or whatever is due, and you need to find that job quickly, there is absolutely no shame or anything like that to take what some people refer to as like an in-between job. So thinking like a job maybe in like retail or food service, some of these jobs that tend to have lower barriers to entry, so to speak. I personally am ready to go. If I ever suffered a layoff, I have my retail resume ready to go. And I am very interested in things like yard work and woodworking and stuff like that. So I know the 5 or 6 hardware stores in my area that I'm going to go and drop my resume off the very next day if I ever get laid off, so that I have some type of, hopefully, assuming that I can land one of those jobs, have some type of income to help keep me afloat while I am doing those other things to maximize my chances of success in the job search. Because again, you can do everything right in the job search, but when you're in a competitive market like we are today and have been, over the last year or so, you want to make sure that you are, doing things to keep you afloat while you are, kind of waiting. Like a lot of the job search, unfortunately, is hurry up and wait. But there are other things you can be doing in the meantime, like working an in-between job, we'll call it, to help keep you afloat. So hopefully that is helpful. But then I would reemphasize, all the advice that was mentioned during this webinar. So, maybe if you, when you get the recording, go back through it and kind of think about like, okay, what am I doing? What am I not doing yet? How can I change my strategies to improve my effectiveness there? So hopefully that's helpful for you. Good question. I am sorry to hear that you are in that situation. I'm assuming, you were describing your own situation there, and I do definitely wish you luck in finding something quickly, as I know that can be stressful. Okay, so our next question here, this person is asking, any tips on finding 100% remote jobs with no travel restrictions in the US? I'm getting conflicting information from companies with them mentioning work from anywhere in the US in the job description, but not while traveling due to tax reasons. So yes, this is a very tricky situation. And it's one that, I can't give you a great answer to, because this often comes down to internal company policy. A company might say, yes, we can hire anywhere in the US, but that means they hire you in your state and then they expect you to work from your state. It doesn't necessarily mean we will hire you anywhere in the US and you can travel around freely throughout the US while working, because they have to sort of set up in their internal systems like, okay, we are paying these taxes and this and that and the other kind of legal hoops that they have to jump through in order to pay you for your work living in your state. But now if you are traveling while working, that can complicate things for them. So, the reason I'm saying that this is a challenging question to answer is because that type of information is not going to be, advertised necessarily. So my best recommendation, were I in this situation, some of the things that I would focus on are, what type of PTO would this job provide me? Typically, they're going to tell you that when they offer you the job. And then I would, ask about, policies related to, travel restrictions, kind of, asking clarification when I receive that offer. So unfortunately, it's one of those things that, you're probably not going to want to ask about at an initial stage, because they might think, okay, this person's only worried about, PTO, or, clearly they're prioritizing their travel over the work. You kind of want to impress them first, and then maybe bring those questions up in your final interview. Or if you're, an extra nervous person like I am, you might even want to wait until, you have the conversation where they offer you the role and they're going through the entire benefits package. So I know that's not ideal, because you could potentially waste a lot of your time there, but really that's going to be something that is very, very difficult to find out or uncover until you get that offer, because that's not going to be, an advertised policy. Like I said, it's going to be more of an internal policy with their HR department. So definitely a tricky situation there. So I'm sorry you're struggling with that. But keep in mind, think about like, okay, if maybe they offer me unlimited PTO and I can, take a week here and a week there and that stuff like that. Or, maybe you'll just find that unicorn, so to speak, at the
the end of the rainbow when you get that job offer and you ask about travel and they say, yep, no problem. You can, travel wherever you want. Or you might find that company say like, yes, you can travel while you work, but you can't stay in one place for more than a week or two. I've heard of companies that have policies like that. So hopefully that's some helpful information. I know that I wasn't able to directly answer your question in the way that you would probably want to answer it, or in the way that I would want to answer it if I had asked that question. But hopefully that is still helpful for you. Okay, so our next one here, this person is asking, when talking about scams, it was mentioned that an employer could ask for your date of birth. Isn't that a protected class and illegal? So to my knowledge, and I will preface this with, I am not an employment lawyer, but to my knowledge, under the federal law, which is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, it is not explicitly illegal for an employer to ask your date of birth. It does, put them in a problematic situation, like maybe kind of suggesting intent to discriminate based on age. So, employers are typically advised to not do that. That being said, different states do have legislation, prohibiting employers from asking about your age or date of birth, or even graduation dates in some instances. But also too, we get an international audience here. So, laws are different state to state, country to country. So it is possible that some people in this webinar might encounter that. Others, might not ever encounter that. So it was worth mentioning. But you're absolutely right. It is a protected class in some instances, but not, across the board. That's why it was mentioned here. But yeah, and I honestly, if you are, if you come across an application, it's asking for your date of birth and you're not comfortable providing that, and it doesn't let you bypass that cell, then you got to make a choice. Like, okay, maybe I don't want to apply for this job if that's something that this company wants to collect for some reason. Oftentimes it's harmless. Like they're literally just checking to make sure that you are over the age of 18 and eligible to work for them. But yeah, you never really know. So it can be a little tricky there. And like I said, if you're uncomfortable, I'm a big believer in going with your instinct there. So hopefully that is helpful. Good question though. I'm glad you brought that up. And let's squeeze in a couple more questions. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left here. Let's see. What are some of the ways that one can skill themselves for remote jobs? So I'm assuming here that you are referring to kind of like remote specific skills. So, when I think of that, I think mostly of like remote communication and collaboration tools. So, video conferencing tools, messaging applications, file sharing software or platforms, things like that. You could, of course, go a little bit more of like an official route and look for, like a Coursera or a Udemy or LinkedIn Learning and find some courses on how to use different tools that way. But also YouTube. YouTube can be a tremendous teaching tool. You could go in, like, let's just say I know, most people know how to use Zoom, but let's say you've never used Zoom before and you go to YouTube and you just type in Zoom tutorial. You will find videos upon videos of people walking you through how to use Zoom effectively. So that's a really nice, easy way to learn some technology skills. Also, keep in mind, like a lot of those companies that provide these different software programs, they have often tutorials or demos or FAQs, things like that on their website that you can learn as well. So that's probably the route that I would go. I'm definitely a let's do the budget friendly route as often as we can. So I'm let's jump on YouTube and figure it out that way kind of guy. That's how I fixed my shower the other week. I watched a YouTube video. Okay, so thank you for asking that question. Hopefully that answer was helpful for you. Let's see. Okay, so our next one here. So most companies state that only those chosen will be contacted. What are some effective follow-up strategies or that you suggest? Research and data supported strategies would be appreciated. Yes, absolutely. So some of the best ways to follow up. So oftentimes, the job posting does not give you much information. Sometimes you get lucky and it gives you a point of contact, or it maybe says the title of the person that, the job you're applying for would report to. And then you could potentially find them, on LinkedIn or maybe on the company's website if they have a directory. But a lot of times you are left kind of, searching and wondering who the right person to contact would be. In those instances, LinkedIn is often your friend. You could go to the company's profile on LinkedIn, go to the people tab, and then you could look to try to find people who have a job title that seems as though they might be working on that team, or maybe they have a job title listed as, a recruiter or working in talent acquisition, or even maybe somebody who's just kind of an HR generalist. And that, can be sort of a way to just kind of get your foot in the door a little bit and potentially find out who, you could contact. You could ask that person if they are aware of that search and could point you in the right direction. Some people will ignore you, not get back to you, that kind of thing. But sometimes you can get some solid information there. Other instances, you will, be hard pressed to find anybody at all. And sometimes, you just have to kind of give it up and hope that things turn out all right. You can't follow up 100% of the time. But really the best approach, and again, this is probably an answer that you didn't necessarily want me to tell you, or that is going to be extremely helpful, is to start ahead of time. We talked in the presentation about target roles, about target companies, about networking, laying that groundwork ahead of time. So you have connections now at the companies that you are looking at applying for. And then when you find a job that you want to apply for, you do apply to it. And then you tell your connection, hey, I recently just applied to this job. Do you happen to know, who I might be able to contact to kind of reiterate my interest or emphasize my interest? That's really kind of the best strategy to take, really just giving yourself that kind of career security by, cultivating and maintaining that strong network with those target roles and target companies in mind. So hopefully that is helpful. I'm going to squeeze in one more question here. Actually, I'll squeeze in two more because these next two are pretty short. So this first one says, what can you do if you don't have access to data from previous jobs to show metrics in your resume? Yeah, so this is a really good question. And a lot of people get kind of like hung up on, I have to include numbers, or I have to quantify things, and I have to include metrics. You don't necessarily, yes, they are good to include if you have them, but not all jobs lend themselves to easily quantifiable metrics. Or sometimes you're in a situation like you're describing here in your question, where the job was, long enough ago and you really just, can't recall or find any of that data. So in those situations, you can still talk, about your successes, but without including numbers. You can talk about how you improved things, or you sped up a process, or you solved a problem. Not all successes, not all accomplishments need to have a number tied to them. Maybe you improved efficiency with something, but not in a way that is easily quantifiable. You can still talk about, the impact that you had, the way that you improved efficiency, how that impacted your team or the organization as a whole in more general sense, without necessarily including those numbers. So, those numbers, those metrics, they're a nice to have. They're not a must have. So try not to stress yourself out about that too much. But also too, since we've been talking about networking, try to rack your brain a little bit. Do you know anybody still at any of those past jobs that, you could reach out to? I actually did that with one of my, I think it was for my current job. I was trying to talk about a specific software program because it was relevant to this job that I was applying for at the time. And I reached out to a past coworker and I was like, hey, what was the name of that software program that we used to do X? Because I couldn't remember it, and they were able to tell me. I know that's not a metric, but if you have stayed in contact with anybody, see if there's anybody left at that organization that you could ask about those things. But good question. Hopefully that response was helpful. And then our last one here. So why do job sites tell you the number of people that have applied? It tends to put me off. Totally understand. I used to feel similarly. I will tell you here in a moment why I don't feel that way anymore. But I don't know for certain why they decide to provide that number. It's probably because maybe they want to, and I'm purely speculating here, but I would think that, they want to show, employers like, hey, look, if you post your jobs with us, you're going to get 1,000 applicants or something like that. Um, it might also be to, encourage job seekers to be like an early applier, which of course is a good job, or excuse me, a good idea. You don't want to get kind of lost in the sauce, so to speak, by, being a late applier. So being an early applier is always a good idea. But the reason I don't allow those numbers to put me off anymore is because the vast majority of the time, I can't speak definitively for all job boards, but the vast majority of the time, I've heard this from recruiters themselves, uh, the number that is being presented, that is representing the number of people that clicked the apply button, not the number of people who actually completed and submitted the application. So that number is misleading. It might say 2,000 people, but in reality, 200 people actually applied. And then going beyond that, you have no idea how many of those 200 people actually took the time to do all of the effective things that we talked about in this presentation. So do your best to ignore that number. Try your best to be an early applier. Like I said, that's often why it's a good idea to use that reverse job search, because if you have, different companies bookmarked and things like that, or like, for example, on FlexJobs, you can follow different companies so you get notifications when they post new jobs. Being an early applier is going to help you, get noticed more effectively. That's not to dissuade you from, applying the things that have been posted for a week plus. But being an early applier as often as possible is always good. But just do keep in mind that that number that you're seeing is not an accurate picture of exactly how many people applied for that role. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Really good question. Appreciate you asking that. Appreciate all of our great questions today. Q&As are always a lot more fun for me when we have these great, insightful questions. So thank you very much for that. Sincerely hope that both the presentation and the Q&A portion of this webinar were beneficial for you all. I know we have quite a few questions we didn't get to, but we do have a set amount of time allotted here. Highly encourage you to check out some of our future webinars. We have some good ones coming up, at the start of the year here. Let's see, on Wednesday, January 8th, which is tomorrow, we have a webinar called Ageism and the Remote Job Search, Tips to Land a Job at Any Age. That is at 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. So if ageism is a concern for you, make sure to check out that webinar. And then on Thursday, which is January 9th, we have a webinar called Changing Careers. You've Decided, Now What's Next? And that'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern. So definitely keep an eye out for some of our future webinars. Thank you for joining us today. Once again, hope that this was helpful for you, and I wish you all the best of luck in your job search. Take care.